All right, it is 1 a.m. on draft day, and I'm pumped. This NFL draft can go any which way outside of the first pick, and I know I'm more of an NBA guy, but I have done plenty of scouting for this year's NFL draft. So I will be running through my top 100 big board. I've already posted my predictive mock draft on Twitter, and then I will link my full top 390 players that I've scouted in the comments under the video that I'll post on Twitter as well if you guys want to see that. But right now I'm just going to quickly run through my top 100, just kind of give some brief analysis, and we'll go from there. So to start off, my number one player in the class is Sonny Styles. I wasn't expecting him to be my number one player in the class when I started scouting, but you just can't deny, the greatest raw athletic scorer of all time, arguably, one of the smartest players at his position ever. I shouldn't say ever, but as a scout or as a prospect ever. And really good production too at the highest level playing for Ohio State. There's no flaws to his game. And in a class like this, it's pretty easy for me to put him number one. I have no doubt in my mind that as a rookie, he will be a top 10 linebacker and could even move his way into the top five in impact, depending on where he gets drafted. I see his career trajectory being similar to that of Fred Warner. With the second on my board is Jeremiah Love. He's another blue chip guy. You can't deny his talent. He doesn't have any holes in his game. He reminds me of a prime David Johnson. If you guys don't remember prime David Johnson, people are drafting him number one overall in fantasy when he had a healthy season. Jeremiah Love, he's also going to be a fantasy football demon. Fantasy football, that's a conversation for another day in a couple months here. But yeah, Jeremiah Love, he's going to be Mr. Consistent, dominant. Super excited to see where he lands. Number 3, I have David Bailey. He could be the next elite edge. We've had quite a few over the past couple years with Jared Verse and Will Anderson. I don't think Bailey is quite on the level that Will Anderson was as a prospect, but you can definitely argue, or I do think he was a better prospect than Jared Verse, and you see the impact he's making right now. I know a lot of people are worried about his bend. While that is something to take in consideration, you can't deny he's an elite talent and he's produced. He's only going to get better. I could see his career trajectory being similar to that of Brian Burns. At number 4, I have Caleb Downs. He's just a jack of all trades. One of the highest prospects coming out of high school. He can line up anywhere on defense. He does have a smaller frame, but you just can't deny the raw talent, and his intuition is the best in the class. There really isn't a comparison for him, but in terms of career trajectory and just kind of, trying to gauge how his career will play out, Antoine Winfield Jr. does come to mind. I think Caleb Downs could definitely be even better. At number 5 is Fernando Mendoza. He could easily be higher on this list. If you see these numbers like the 8.8, 8.3, that doesn't have a specific meaning to them. That is just more of a objective number I can put for me so I can rank these guys accurately, just because with 390 people scouted, it's going to be really hard for me to differentiate, especially in the mid to later rounds. So don't worry about that. That's just for me to understand my own rankings. But it'll also give you a good idea of how close a lot of these guys are in terms of tier of a prospect. Anyway, after that tangent, Fernando Mendoza, number 5. He's a winner. He's extremely intelligent, great character, great work ethic, has plenty of tools. He doesn't have, that superstar trait that would, is like winning the lottery for the number one overall pick, like Caleb Williams was. But he does have everything he needs in order to be an all-time great. But at the same time, there is a chance that he can just end up being a average starting caliber quarterback. But with that being said, he's proven he can win, and he won the Heisman. So I kind of see him in the same caliber as Trevor Lawrence for his career. I'm not saying they're similar in terms of play style or as a prospect, because obviously Trevor Lawrence was arguably generational. But in terms of just career output, with what we've seen with Trevor Lawrence so far, I can kind of see Mendoza following that same trajectory. At number 6, we have Arvell Reese. You watch his film, and it is filthy. He could play linebacker. He could be an edge rusher. The power this guy has is unbelievable. He does have that similar play style to Micah Parsons. Do I think he will be Micah Parsons? No, or else he would be number 1 on this list. But he can definitely be an all-pro and just an overall great player. Sky's the limit for him. I do think how he's utilized will impact, how well his career will be. If whatever team drafts him just lets him ball out like Ohio State did, he's going to be great. I probably should put him higher just because of how high his ceiling is. But having 2 linebackers in the top 5, I don't know how I feel about that, so he just misses out at 6. At number 7, we have Spencer Fano. He's just your stereotypical big old reliable offensive tackle. There's nothing more to it. I see him as a Taylor Decker type of guy. Very easy to draft and not have any regrets. At number 8, we have one of my guys in the draft. I guarantee you he will outperform whatever spot he gets drafted. Blake Miller is so underrated. He is just an absolute monster. I don't know why people don't have him. Sorry, my phone just lost Wi-Fi. I don't know why people don't have him higher on their boards. He's pretty similar to Garrett Bowles for me. And I know when Garrett Bowles, in his draft class, I was a bit lower on him. He proved me wrong. I'm not going to make that same mistake with Blake Miller. At number 9, we have Ruben Bain. He could easily be top 3 or even number 1 on this list. But the arm length is an issue. It's something that's extremely worrying. We just haven't seen a guy with that short of arms, be a superstar. So we'll see. But I'm still extremely high on him. He kind of reminds me of Dwight Freeney. Really excited to see where he goes as well. Now at number 10, you're probably thinking, what the hell, who is this guy? Yeah, I have Keegan Trost. Most people have him as a guard. I have him as an offensive tackle. He could play both positions, but why would I have a guy who is projected in the 5th round sneaking into my top 10? Well, Keegan Trost, he has played a crap ton of snaps, has the experience. He has just so much power. Arvell Reese has the most power in this class. I think Trost is right up there, following behind him. And again, he's versatile. He can play multiple positions. He doesn't give up sacks. It's kind of like Jeremiah Love in the sense that he has no holes either. I don't know what other people are missing. He's clearly going to be a really good starting offensive lineman. My comp for him is Laramie Tunsil. So either I'm crazy or everyone else is. We'll find out in a few years. At number 11, we have Chris Johnson at San Diego State. Lanky guy, very smart, plays smoothly, doesn't make mistakes. He's my number 1 corner in the class. He reminds me of Travarius Ward, and I think he could definitely be better. I hope he falls to the Bears and the Bears get him, but I think we're going to trade back. I don't know, we'll see. But if the Bears get Chris Johnson, I'll be ecstatic. At number 12, we have Kenyon Sadiq, polarizing prospect. Freak athlete, runs these wide receiver routes and kind of has a wide receiver build to him. Just a unique combination of athleticism and route running and just IQ for a tight end. I can't understate how unique it is, or how he is as a prospect. And again, the comp, there really isn't a comp for him. He's kind of like a brand new type of tight end prospect. The closest thing I can think of is when Noah Fant was a prospect. He's just speedy down the field, almost wide receiver-like type of guy. Obviously not the NFL version of Noah Fant because he hasn't lived up to expectations, but that's just kind of how I view Sadiq here. At number 13, another one of my guys. Don't know why he isn't higher on draft boards. Eli Stowers, out of Vanderbilt. He's big, versatile, super high floor. While his ceiling isn't as high as Kenyon Sadiq's, I could see Stowers being the best tight end in the class, no doubt. I think he has a very similar game to Isaiah Likely. It's more of that new age tight end, can be used in plenty of different ways. He's also someone I think you should target in Dynasty Fantasy. Again, that's a conversation for another day. At 14, we have Avion Terrell. He's your lockdown nickel corner. Very similar to Kyler Gordon. I think Terrell has a chance to be better. 15, my number one receiver in the class. And I say number one, but as you can see, I'm going to have a long list of receivers here from now until the back end of the first round in terms of grades. But I got Elijah Surratt. The reason is he's just super consistent, has a high floor. I don't think any receiver in this class is guaranteed to be a superstar. I just think there's a lot of really good players, but we're not going to have a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors type of guy. He reminds me of a prime Allen Robinson, just doesn't do anything wrong. And in this type of class where there can be a lot of hit and misses, I do value consistency. Right behind him, though, at 16 is Jordan Tyson. I think the only reason why I have him behind Surratt is just because of the injury concerns. I'm not super worried about them because he is just a great talent, super fun to watch. I think he'll be utilized kind of similar to how the Raiders and Jags utilized Jacoby Myers this past year. Just feed him with targets while being the second or third best wide receiver on a team. Could he be a wide receiver one? Yeah, for sure. But I think he's going to be best suited as a wide receiver two that, gets all the heavy targets. At 17, we have Makai Lemon. He's pretty much a copy and paste of Zay Flowers. That's just the best way to describe him, simply put. 18, we have Dylan Thieneman. Might have butchered that. Dude is a freak of nature, has killer instinct. My comp for him is Jesse Bates. I don't think he can be as good as Jesse Bates, but I think that's what he should shoot for. He has that type of instincts, quality, killer mentality, where he can have a Jesse Bates type of impact. Super excited to watch him in the NFL. At 19, we have Skylar Bell. Super high on him. He's going to be a steal, obviously. He was a Biletnikoff finalist, insane athlete, and he had over 3 yards per route run this year. I don't see why other people don't have him in the first round. That's kind of crazy to me. He's clearly going to be a very good wide receiver. I don't see him fading out of the league at all. I think he plays very similarly to Khalil Shakir. I do think he'll be better than Khalil Shakir. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be right about him. If he was in an LSU jersey instead of UConn, I think other people would say the same. At number 20, we have Omar Cooper Jr. He's just your go up and get it guy. I see him being very similar to Rashee Rice. Do I think he will be as good as him? Might depend on landing spot, but he's just the Rashee Rice type of guy. Pretty reliable as well, and a proven winner. So we'll see where he goes. It'd be pretty cool to see the Raiders trade up to snag him in the first round and pair him with Mendoza. Hopefully that happens. That'd be really fun. 21, we have Jacob Rodriguez. I'm really high on the linebacker class this year. I've noticed Rodriguez is a proven leader, super productive. He's a proven winner. He's the type of guy that everyone overlooks because they think his production won't be able to translate to the NFL, and it's not a common position of need. That's what they thought about Nick Bolton too with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he was one of the most important players in at least one, if not multiple, of their Super Bowl wins. I see Jacob Rodriguez being that exact same type of guy. At 22, we have Vega Ioane. He's just an all-around starting caliber guard. There really isn't too much to say about him. You could think of him as like maybe a Kevin Zeitler. Won't blow you away, but you won't have to worry about filling that position for quite a few years. At 23, we do have Bryce Lance. Yes, this is the brother of Trey Lance, and I 100% guarantee he will be better than Trey. He's your long ball athlete, wide receiver. Unreal athleticism. Just go up and get it guy. I think he's kind of I don't want to say elite. I think that term's overused, but he's a very, very good version of MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Interested to see where he gets drafted. At 24, I have Kyle Lewis out of Pitt. He's a coverage linebacker who can also play safety. He can also rush the quarterback. I think that's an underrated trait of his. Very similar to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I think Kyle Lewis is very underrated. At 25, I do have Carnell Tate. So there's a couple of reasons why I don't have him as my wide receiver one like most people do. He plays big. He's been productive. I'm just not sold on his ability to be multi-dimensional in the NFL. And I know Ohio State right now is wide receiver U, but I just haven't seen the versatility from him that I have from the other Ohio State wide receivers. I see him. I mean, if he hits his ceiling, he's going to be Drake London, right? And I wasn't really high on Drake London. He's turned into the prospect that a lot of people thought he was. But even then, I think people are expecting Carnell Tate to blossom into this next superstar like Marvin Harrison, or at least that's my perception. I do think he can be really solid, but I also see a world where he never becomes a wide receiver one. So we'll see how that plays out. At 26, I have De'Zhaun Stribling. Great hands, really good route runner. Reminds me of Michael Wilson on the Arizona Cardinals. I wouldn't be mad if the Bears pick him up in the second round. At 27, we have Nick Singleton. I know, someone else besides Jeremiah Love, or another running back besides Jeremiah Love, in the top 30 here is pretty crazy compared to consensus, but he's great with contact. He produced in college at Penn State. Just a tough runner. Reminds me of Tony Pollard. Um, I think he'll surprise some people in how fast he can impact the game his rookie year. At 28, I have R. Mason Thomas. Great combination of size, speed, and power. He still is pretty raw, but this is a guy I would love to take a shot on at the end of the first round and try to develop him. He reminds me of Josh Uche a bit. At 29, we have Mansour Delane. Definitely not as high on him as other people are, but he did only allow 38.2% completion rate on the wide receivers that he guarded. His tape doesn't really show that to me. He's a pretty confusing prospect for me to nail down. And same thing with the comp here. The reason why I have him comped to McDuffie is because that was kind of the same way I viewed him. I wasn't as high on him as other people were, and I was wrong. And that was because the numbers showed that McDuffie was better than what I thought, but the tape just didn't back that up, in my opinion. So if Delane proves what McDuffie did twice in a row, then I'll definitely need to learn and take that into consideration for the future. But again, I'm more of a basketball guy, not a football guy. This is just where I have him right now. At 30, we have Francis Mauigoa. I do think he's slightly overrated. I don't think he is the prospect that he was at the beginning of the year, but he does have a super high floor. This is a low-risk pick, even if you do draft him in the top 10, which is higher than where I have him ranked. I think he's very similar to Caleb McGarry. I think he could be better as well. At 31, we have Chris Bell. Man, one of the most fun players to watch at Louisville. I really wish he didn't get injured, and I'm not too worried about the injury. Definitely a guy who's going to put up some big fantasy points, and he reminds me of a wide receiver I was super high on last year. People just dogged on me for it, and he turned out to have a great rookie year, and that's Elic Iomanner. Chris Bell is going to be this year's Elic Iomanner, 100% sure. So keep an eye out for Chris Bell. At 32, we have Emmanuel McNeil Warren, safety out of Toledo. Wouldn't be mad if the Bears drafted him in the first round. He's had 11 forced fumbles in his career. He's a big hitter, can play anywhere. Safety, corner. He's just the type of guy everyone wants on their team. I think he could have a similar impact to Jeremy Chin. At 33, we have Deion Burks out of Oklahoma. He's your small, speedy wide receiver. Definitely get him into the kick return and punt return, but he's not just a special teams returner guy. I do think he is a true deep threat because he produced at Oklahoma. I would say he's very similar to Tank Dell in that sense. And if people forgot, before Tank Dell's injury, he was balling out. I think Deion Burks can do the exact same thing. At 34, we have Emmanuel Pregnant. He's very quick for a guard. He has good hands. He won't blow you away on tape, but, he just does everything pretty well, has some really good traits. My best comp for him is Mark Lewinsky. A lot of people won't remember Mark Lewinsky, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. Number 35, we have Monroe Freeling. He's been a huge riser for a lot of people here. He's kind of consistently stayed late first, early second for me. Just a huge dude and super tenacious player. I don't think there's anything that comes out at me of him, having this huge meteoric rise and being like, oh, this is someone I need to get in the first round. But I could see his career turning up somewhat similar to how Charles Cross has performed so far. And honestly, Charles Cross may be a stretch, but I don't think other people would disagree. At 36, we have Dalen Everett out of Georgia. He's just your typical good Georgia Bulldog corner. Um, Again, I don't think he's going to be anything special. I don't think he has a low floor. Like, he'll be in the league for a while. I think of a guy like Chidobe Awuzie for him. At 37, we have Devin Moore out of Florida. He does a bit of everything as well. Can play kind of anywhere on the field. For his comp, I just went with Rock Ya-Sin. Again, nothing great, nothing bad, just consistent, good level starter. At 38, we have VJ Payne. He is kind of similar to Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I just don't think he's quite as versatile. One of those hard hitters, very similar to Jaquan Brisker, almost a copy and paste of the same prospect. 39, deep sleeper running back right here, Jamari Taylor. You better learn the name. He is a compact running back, but man, can he break tackles. Yeah, he's absolutely going to outperform his where he gets drafted. Reminds me a bit of J.K. Dobbins in college. And I do think Jamari Taylor will be a really good RB2 in the league. Might even get some RB1 looks as well. At 40, we have Caleb Lomu. He beat David Bailey pretty often when they matched up against each other. I almost want to put him higher only because of that. He's very agile. I probably do have him too low, to be honest. He's a very safe pick. My comp for him is Bernard Raymond. At 41, we have Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech. He is just an intimidating, violent bull rusher, throw you around wherever. Kind of reminds me of DJ Reader in that sense. At 42, we got Markel Bell. I mean, where do you put this guy? He's a massive 6'9", damn near 400 pounds, but he has moments where he looks like the best tackle on earth, and then others where he just gets pancaked by a guy half his size. I just think you have to try to draft the upside here because he's just rare to find. And with the comp, I mean, Daniel Falele is the only guy relative to his size, and I know that's lazy just going based off of measurements, but there really isn't anyone else like Markel Bell. 43 of Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska. He plays the exact same way as James Cook, and I think they're a very similar level of prospect coming out of college. I don't think Emmett Johnson will be as good as James Cook, but it's just interesting to note. I do think Emmett Johnson will be a successful running back in the league. I think the only issue with him is that they can kind of be one-dimensional and easy to game plan, but he's just a great talent and should be higher on other people's boards for sure. At 44, we have Le'Veon Moss. Definitely higher on him than other people. He can run the ball, catch it out of the backfield. He does have a fumble issue. I don't think he's going to be like your guaranteed running back one, but I do think his floor is a solid RB2, something similar to Rachaad White. 45, we have Denzel Boston. I really, really, really liked him at the start of the season, but the more I've scouted him, the less confident I am in him being a first-round prospect. He has a great catch radius. He's a good red zone target, but I'm concerned about him one-on-one with corners. I don't think he does well or holds his own in man coverage like I want to see out of a first-round pick. So I think a good comp for him right now is Cedric Tillman. Very high potential, but there's just some things there that I'm worried about translating. At 46, we have Jermod McCoy. He is an absolutely elite talent, but the injury concerns are glaring, and I think anyone who has him in the first half of the first round, or even top 20, top 25, they really need to take a step back and look into this injury, because it's absolutely super serious, and it could already be close to career ending. So I'm gonna hesitate, put him, mid second round pick. But if he does stay healthy and come back to how he played in 2024, he could easily be the next Jalen Johnson. So hopefully he does become the next Jalen Johnson. I'm wishing him well. But you just never know with those types of injuries. At 47, we have Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. I could have him 20 spots higher. I could have him 20 spots lower. Really hard to nail down. I think his production will depend on his landing spot and how they use him. He definitely is a gadget player, but I could see him, being a wide receiver 2 or 3 on a team, depending on his development. I think the best comp for him is Marvin Mims. At 48, we have CJ Allen, also out of Georgia. He's just your stereotypical dog of a linebacker from Georgia. They have a great linebacker program over there. I think he plays and thinks very similarly to Patrick Queen. I do not think he will reach the potential of Patrick Queen, but he does have that same play style to him. At 49, we have Trayden Stukes. He has been a late riser. Recently, people are mocking him to possibly even go in the first round, which is a little bit of a stretch for me, but I do like that he's getting plenty of love, because he's just a great ball hawk and is very versatile. I think of him as like a CJ Gardner-Johnson type of guy. Really excited to see where he ends up. At 50, we have Casey Concepcion. A bit lower on him than consensus. He's very shifty, really good route runner, thrives after the catch. Kind of reminds me of a smaller Deebo Samuel. It's just hard for that to fit into a lot of NFL team systems. He very well could outperform where I have him right now, but I just like a lot of the other wide receivers over him this year. At 51, we have Caleb Banks. He has a very unique combination of size and play style. It's really hard to compare him to anyone, but you can obviously tell that he's a good talent. I think he will have a very similar impact to Travis Jones. Like, I don't think Caleb Banks will be an all-pro, but I do think, he could be a good starter or very good rotation piece depending on the defense that he lands in. At 52, we have Harrison Wallace. Again, I really like the depth at this wide receiver class, and I'm not afraid to put a bunch of them in the first 2 rounds here. Harrison Wallace is another one that I just think is super underrated. Just a smooth route runner. Will be a steal wherever he gets drafted. Reminds me a lot of Christian Kirk. And at 53, we have Kendall Daniels, linebacker from Florida. Really good cover linebacker, freak athlete. He kind of reminds me of Mark Barron. I think a lot of people remember Mark Barron with the Broncos. Was it the Broncos? Yeah, Broncos. I don't think he will go this high. So, a team will probably be able to steal him in the 3rd or 4th. If he doesn't get drafted in the 3rd or 4th, that's crazy. I think the talent there is just obvious. At 54, you have Derek Moore out of Michigan. He's just going to be a reliable rotation edge rusher. Similar play style to Sam Hubbard, but definitely won't have quite the impact that Sam Hubbard did. At 55, we have Jake Golday. He's your traditional middle linebacker prospect. I think he has a ceiling of Jermaine Pratt. I don't think he's going to ever be a guaranteed starter. He may just be a rotational backup. but I think it's worth taking here in the middle of the second round. At 56, it is Malachi Lawrence out of UCF. He's been a late riser. His traits just jump off at you. It's pretty tempting not to take him higher and bank on those traits translating. For me, I just want to see more before I can put him any higher. I think he has a ceiling of Carl Lawson, but I can also see him having a low floor and see him not translating. So another very unique, interesting prospect this year at the edge position to be on the lookout for. At 57, we have CJ Daniels, the wide receiver. He does all of the little things. Very, very similar to Donovan Peoples-Jones. His career hasn't turned out like we thought it would. I think CJ Daniels is going to have a little bit more of a promising career there, assuming it all works out. At 58 is D'Angelo Pons. Obviously, he is just a super tiny cornerback, and will have to try to emulate that Kenny Moore model play style from the Colts. That's his ceiling. That's where he wants to get to. Super talented, super sticky, play disruptor. It's just a matter of will he be able to do that at his size in the NFL. At 59, we have Keldrick Falk. Definitely lower on him than consensus. He's a huge edge who I also think can play defensive tackle. I think he can kind of be used similarly to how the Packers used Rashawn Gary, except I think Rashawn Gary is way more talented. I don't know. It's just hard for him to... Yeah, I just don't see him being a first-round guy. He lacks the burst. He might need to cut down, get a little bit stronger. But I still do think he can be, a reliable backup. At 60, we have Ted Hurst, one of my favorite mid-major, small school guys. He's just like this speedy, thin, playmaking wide receiver. I'm not sure if you guys remember DJ Chark as a prospect who got drafted to the Jags quite a few years back, but I think Ted Hurst can kind of be like what we thought DJ Chark was going to be. Hopefully he gets drafted into a situation where he gets playing time right away. I really hope people give him a chance, or the organization gives him a chance to flourish early. 61, we have Jonah Coleman. He is an exact copy and paste of Devontae Freeman in terms of play style. I don't think he will reach the potential of Devontae Freeman, but if you've never seen him play before, if you know who Devontae Freeman is, then you already know who Jonah Coleman is. The exact same player. At 62, we have Aiden Fisher out of Indiana. He actually has like the exact same prospect athletic score and production score as linebacker Tommy Eichenberg. If you guys know him, got drafted by the Raiders. Again, I really like the linebackers in this class, so he drops in here at the end of the second round. Maybe that's a bit high for him, but I just like his game. At 63, we have Max. I'm not going to pronounce that last name. That's too difficult for me. He doesn't have any flaws, or not many. I do think his ceiling is a bit limited. My comp for him is Colton Miller, which isn't the greatest because Colton Miller is a stud. So let's just say a year one or year two version of Colton Miller is kind of where I see Max ending up. A lot of people have him at the end of round one. Again, I just don't see any star traits or qualities that would warrant a first round pick on him. At 64, we have DeMonte Capehart. Yeah, he is a physical run stopper. 0 missed tackles in 2024. That is extremely rare. If he's not on your radar, go watch film. You will understand he is just a beast. Reminds me of Folorunso Fatukasi. Honestly, he could be better. I could see him surprising a lot of people, and I definitely think he should be taken in round 2, if not, early round 2. At 65, we have Josiah Trotter. He is just a linebacker that can fly around the field and is a tackle machine. When I watch him, I think of Diane Henley from the Chargers. At 66, we got Justin Jolly out of NC State. Really good tight ends. I think he'll be very reliable. Reminds me of Evan Engram. That's pretty much all I have to say about him. At 67, we have Takario Davis. Has kind of fallen off as a prospect over the past year and a half, but I still believe in his potential. Super high RAS and his great man coverage. He just has some flaws outside of those two areas. Reminds me of Paulson and Debo a little bit. At 68, we have Brian Parker out of Duke. Just a strong, high floor, stereotypical center. Reminds me of Connor McGovern a little bit. I know McGovern played more guard than center. Brian Parker could play guard, but I think he should be drafted as a center. I don't know what it is with the Duke centers from Graham Barton to now Brian Parker, but they know what they're doing over there. 69, we have Zion Young. Great size, great pursuit. I think he is a project player a little bit, and he does need development, but if he gets handled the right way, he could easily become a Zadarius Smith caliber guy. Again, all just depends on landing spot. That's usually how it is in the NFL compared to the NBA. NBA, the good players always rise to the top. In the NFL, it is extremely dependent on your landing spot, how they develop you, and the opportunities that they give you. At 70, we have Hezekiah Masses out of California. He's had plenty of production. He's a bit undersized, definitely lightweight. I think I'm heavier than him, and I'm 5'9", so that says a lot about how much of a stick he is. Kind of reminds me of Shaq Griffin in that sense, but I do think he has some high potential to be a good rotational cornerback in the league. 71, we have Vincent Anthony Jr. Great arm length, and he's gotten better year over year. Kind of reminds me of Dayo This is a hard name, sorry. Dayo Odeyingbo. I should have that nailed down since he was a Chicago Bear, but it is what it is. Honestly, I wouldn't mind if the Bears picked up Vincent Anthony in the late second, early third round. Why not? Give him a shot. 72, we have Anthony Hill Jr. He's super young to be in the draft, which is a good sign. And he's really, really good off the blitz. Super quick, just a tackle getter. Reminds me of Devin Lloyd a little bit. I know people use Devin Lloyd as just like your any type of linebacker comp, but I do think Anthony Hill Jr. Is similar to him legitimately. At 73, we have Mike Washington Jr. I've loved him from the start when I started scouting this guy, and I think a lot of people are on the same page now. Super strong, and once he hits the open field, he's gone. He runs a 4.3 as a stocky linebacker, which is just wild. He reminds me of a more explosive Chuba Hubbard. He could easily outperform his ranking at 73, honestly. At 74, we have Tyler Onyedin. I think his role is simply just going to be a sturdy rotation defensive tackle, kind of like a current version of Kenny Clark or a mid version of Kenny Clark. Doesn't do much wrong, but I like what I see on film. 75, we have AJ Halsey out of LSU. Great ball skills, very smart player, super experienced playing for LSU in the SEC. Reminds me of Cam Curl a bit. At 76, we have Dominique Orange out of Iowa State. Yeah, this guy's huge. He takes up space, super high potential. He can handle double teams very well. He reminds me of Oli McNeil. I'm kind of tempted to put him even higher just because of, if he really develops well, he could be a pretty scary player to play against. But at 77, we have Demetrius Crownover. Massive frame, really good feet for his size. Really good run blocker. I think he is similar to Darnell Wright in that sense. I don't think he has the raw talent that Darnell Wright does, which is why I have him as a third-round grade, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on and should be celebrated if your team drafts him. At 78, we have Charles Demings, the cornerback out of Stephen F. Austin. If you guys don't know who this is, you better go watch the film. He is just an absolute legend. He is a freak on the ball in man coverage, super fast. I think he has over a 40-inch vertical, like over a 10.8 broad. I'm surprised he didn't get picked up by a bigger school at one point, but he should definitely get drafted in the top 100 here. Huge fan of him. Reminds me of Eric Stokes a little bit. And then at 79, I got Drew Aller, my QB2. Yeah, no Ty Simpson. I'm super low on him. Again, I'll be posting my full 390 on Twitter, which will be linked in the comments if you want to take a look to see where some of the guys that you expect to be on the top 100 that aren't, you can find them there. But Drew Aller, he's getting a lot of flack right now, and I understand why. He's a very boomer bust QB prospect, but I'm leaning towards the boom for him. All the traits are there for him to be great. It wasn't more than just a year ago where people were having him in top 5, top 10 conversations, but he just had a down year, dealt with some injuries, and now all of a sudden he's kind of off people's radars. But I think he is very similar to Carson Wentz. Not necessarily as a prospect, because that would warrant being a top pick, but Carson Wentz, he had that one year where he was in MVP conversations, and then you see him this past year with the Vikings where he looked awful. And I think Drew Aller, he has the talent to potentially develop into a top half of the league QB, but also I can see him kind of being like this current Carson Wentz or Zach Wilson where, he has all the tools but just can't put it together. I think in such a weak QB class like this, why not take a shot at him early and just develop him if you have a good starting QB right now. There's no reason for him not to be drafted in the top 3 rounds, in my opinion. At 80, again, I'm going to butcher this name, Max Llewellyn out of Iowa. He's just like your every draft. Iowa has a guy that's just like your aggressive farmer boy, either offensive or defensive lineman that just gets after it. And he has great size and great traits that go along with it. Very reminiscent of a former Hawkeye, AJ Epinesa, in my opinion. Wouldn't be mad if the Bears got him in the 3rd round at all. I would love that. At 81, we have Chris Brazel. Could say it either way. Out of Tennessee. He's your big play wide receiver. Some people have him with some elite traits. I don't quite see it. I do think he will get drafted higher than what his true talent is. And I think in the league, he will kind of play an Allen Lazard role. And that's also just assuming he stays healthy. So that's kind of why I have him down here in the 3rd. At 82, we have Seth McGowan, running back out of Kentucky. Man, Dude is a workhorse. He is a super tough runner. I think a really good comparison to not only his play style but career outlook is Brian Robinson Jr. Yeah, definitely a fan of Seth McGowan. And then at 83, we have Gabe Jacas, one of my favorite players from my Illini, and surprisingly, I'm a bit lower on him than consensus, even though I do really like him. Pure power, great effort. He never gives up on plays, but he is missing that fast twitch, getting off the line that you want from an edge rusher. So that's why I have him lower than consensus. Kind of reminds me of Boye Mafe. And Boye Mafe, even though he doesn't necessarily have that quick twitch, he's impactful. And I think that's what other people see in Gabe Jacas, is him reaching that Boye Mafe level. I think that's his absolute ceiling, and I don't trust that it'll hit, but you never know. 84, I have Genesis Smith. Good size, great ball tracking, but he does have some really questionable mistakes. That's why I don't have him higher, because he is extremely talented. I guess I could consider him a Walmart version of Javon Holland. Holland, one of my favorite safety prospects from recent years, and he's had a great career so far, but Genesis Smith kind of has that same play style, but just isn't mentally present and intuitive like Javon Holland is. 85, we have Joshua Josephs out of Tennessee. He's kind of just a copy and paste of Azeez Ojulari. Nothing fun, nothing interesting there to talk about. But at 86, we have Michael Trigg out of Baylor. This dude's tape is unreal. When I very first started scouting, I had him as my tight end 1 in the first round, because the tape just jumped out at me and was like, oh my gosh, this dude is the next great tight end. But he put up a 28-inch vertical. I could do that right now. I think a lot of people can. His testing was scary to me. So after doing a lot more research, I'm kind of backing off on him slowly, little by little. But there are just some players that play better on field than they test. And I think he could be kind of like a Jared Cook type of guy. Really hard to figure out him as a prospect and also a comparison for him, though. At 87, we have Colton Hood. I don't understand the first round hype around him, and that goes for quite a few players, clearly. But he's an okay player. I really don't have anything exceedingly good to say about him. There's nothing terrible. I guess a comp is Cam Taylor-Britt. I don't know. I don't see him being more than a third corner on your team. That's just my opinion. That's how I view him. At 88, we have Zane Durant. Pretty much a copy and paste of a current Grady Jarrett. Can he get better? Yes. Could he also just be at his peak? Sure. Again, we're getting to the range where player 65 and player 105 are very similar in rankings. So we're getting nitpicky here. At 89, we have Grayson Halton out of Oklahoma. He's a bit smaller for defensive tackle, but he plays bigger than his actual size. Kind of reminds me of B.J. Hill in that sense. At 90, we got Sam Roush out of Stanford. Definitely reminiscent of a young Jake Ferguson out of Wisconsin. If you remember Jake Ferguson as a prospect, he was never supposed to be this super good tight end like he is now. He has completely exceeded expectations. And I think Sam Roush is just kind of the same way, since he just has those fundamentals nailed down. He does everything right. And who knows, maybe with the right system, he can become the next Jake Ferguson in terms of, how well he's just flown up the depth chart and has been utilized with the Cowboys. But again, that all depends on landing spot. 91, we have Jacoby Lane. He's a tall playmaker, super talented, but I question his effort sometimes. He can give up on plays. And I just, that's one of the things I hate most when I see on film is when people don't give 100% effort, and you can actually see them giving up on plays. So that's why it kind of reminds me of Keon Coleman. I was super high on him in his draft class, but there's been some effort issues, and he's kind of fallen off as of recently. That's why Jacoby Lane and Keon Coleman are kind of one and the same for me. 92, we have Jalen Catalon. Definitely smaller, but he plays bigger than his size yet again. He could be a second string safety blanket, a more toned down version of Jordan Whitehead, I guess is the best comparison I could think of. 94, you have Sebastian Harsh. A lot of you have probably never heard of him. So I'm going to turn you on because, yes, he is a massive project player. Definitely not ready to get reps year one as a rookie in the league, but he has all the traits that you want. He's super quick, good with his hands. He's intuitive. He just doesn't have it all put together yet. Kind of reminds me of Josh Paschal in that way. And, Josh doesn't have it all put together yet, but I could see him, being a breakout player this year. And I think Sebastian Harsh, may take 2 or 3 years, but I could see one day people looking back and being like, wow, that was a crazy steal that they got him in the 6th or 7th round. 95, I have Akeem Mesidor. I can't stand that people are mocking him. I shouldn't say mocking him, but like in their big board to have him top 20. The amount of time he leaves his feet is crazy. You just can't do that in the NFL. He can get away with it in college, but I just question the translation of his game. Very similar to Jonathan Bullard when he was a prospect. Just super highly touted, great traits, but just doesn't utilize his body like an NFL player should. He needs to fix that 100%. At 96, I have Caden Proctor. Very polarizing prospect, but I do think a lot of teams are banking on his upside because he is a huge talent, extremely talented, great size, but he has bricks for feet. He cannot move whatsoever. And with how quick these defensive linemen are in the NFL, I am extremely concerned about that translating. My comp for him would be DJ Humphries. 97, we have Peter Woods. Probably the most mocked player to the Bears, which scares me because I do not want him in the first round. Again, very high potential, and he's quick, has good hands, but I feel like people are more in love with the idea of him than what he's shown us, and I just don't see that translating quite yet. Reminds me of Derek Nottie. At 98, we have Kieran Crawford out of Auburn. Another project defensive end. I'm not afraid to rank those highly simply because defensive ends are pretty easy. I shouldn't say pretty easy, but it's very common for them to develop faster than other positions. And he has all the traits to do so. Kind of reminds me of Arnold Ebiketie in a way. At 99, we have Justin Jefferson, linebacker from Alabama. He flies around all over the field. I think he has potential to be a great leader, but he's super undersized, and I don't know if that'll translate. Very similar to Malcolm Rodriguez. I think Malcolm Rodriguez is what he should aim to be as a player. I think that's his ceiling, which, again, we're talking about the end of round 3 here. That's not a bad ceiling to have for this quality of a prospect. And then very last player at 100 is Brandon Cisse. I know right now he's getting a lot of early round 2 looks, and a lot of people that I trust and follow are even higher on him. I just don't see it on tape. I still think he's pretty raw. I think he can work in multiple schemes. Like, I don't think where he lands is going to matter too much to his development. because he is a really good ball hawk, but there is going to be a learning curve for him before he becomes impactful. My comp for him is Kyle Fuller. So there you have it. That's my top 100 for the 2026 NFL draft. I'm pumped, but right now it is like close to 2 a.m. and I need to get some sleep. So see you later. Love God, love others, love yourself. Peace.